If you've been following our Toronto real estate market for the last couple years, months, or weeks, then you've probably heard a lot about firm offers, conditional offers, bidding wars, all of those types of things. We're going to talk today about how a shifting market has impacted the way offers are submitted and deals are actually structured and negotiated, specifically when it comes to conditions. Before we get started, I'm Stephanie Nause with the Homeplicity Realty Group here at Keller Williams, and I'm passionate about helping our clients build and develop wealth through real estate. If you're interested in tips on buying a home, selling a home, or investing in Toronto real estate, I hope you'll consider subscribing to our channel. If you get value from this content, go ahead and give us a like. And if there's any other videos that you'd be interested in seeing, go ahead and comment down below. We're happy to make those for you. So if you've bought a property or you had a friend or family buy a property in the last couple of years and they had bought with what we call a firm offer or no conditions, go ahead and drop into the comments what that experience was like for you. So that's really become the norm in the last couple of years. And I'm finding now as we're working with our buyers, or even when I'm receiving offers on our sellers listings from other agents, they're apologizing for having conditions in, or the buyers are asking if they can have the conditions in. And my answer is yes. Yes, you can. I mean, obviously it's not ideal for the sellers. There's nothing better than getting an offer that the buyer can't back out of. But from a buyer's perspective, this is fantastic. We have the ability now to be able to negotiate a little bit on price, to be more flexible in closing date, not to be in competition with 26 other offers, and we can have some conditions in there. So let's talk about what a condition is. When we're talking about conditions, it's basically an escape clause for the buyer. This will allow the purchaser or the seller, sometimes maybe on a lawyer review, to have a certain amount of time that they can do their due diligence on things like financing or home inspection to make sure that it's satisfactory to them. And if it's not, they have the ability to withdraw their offer and get their deposit check back without any interest penalties or deductions. We're going to talk today a little bit more about what conditions are, what the common conditions will be, and stay tuned until the end because I'm going to just highlight, even though people are getting conditions in their offers, there's one condition that sellers still aren't agreeing to. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so we already talked about the condition. It's basically like an escape clause. It has to be either assigned to the buyer or the seller and give a certain amount of time in which for them to do their due diligence and be satisfied, and then send in a notice saying, yes, the condition's been fulfilled. Typically, a condition can be anywhere from 2 to 10 days, depending on what the condition is. And like I said, it's to the benefit of one of the parties. There's usually some verbiage in the condition that says, in the buyer's sole and absolute discretion. When we have that in there, it means they don't have to give a reason why they're rescinding their offer. It could be conditional on financing, but we're not, if they say sole and absolute discretion, it means they don't have to say why, which also means from the seller's perspective that if they wake up and get buyer's remorse, or if they see something in the news that spooks them, or another condo in the condo complex came up that seems like better deal, they actually have the ability to withdraw their offer. So it's not ideal for the seller. So if you're banking on having a firm offer before you make a purchase, you probably want to wait for the buyer to firm up any conditions. And I keep saying buyer because typically the offers are drafted and submitted by the purchasers, and they will have the conditions to the benefit of the buyer for some of the basic ones that we're going to outline next. So common conditions that you're going to see in offers, it's pretty much always we're going to see financing. Interest rates have gone up and lenders have tightened their criteria a little bit. Buyers everywhere are rejoicing that they have the ability to actually have maybe a 5 to 7 day condition on financing. So they will submit their accepted offer from the seller with the price, conditions, timeline for closing, all of that all spelled out to their lender for final approval. And then when the lender is comfortable with it, then they can send in a notice of fulfillment or a waiver that it's been completed. If for some reason they weren't happy with the terms of their financing, then they would be able to rescind the offer and get their deposit check back. For condos, for assignment sales, for houses, we typically are seeing conditions on financing right now. And then for a house, we're likely going to see a home inspection. Sometimes our sellers will do a pre-listing home inspection just so they can get ahead of things and understand if there's any potential issues with the house so that we can factor that into the price when we're listing the home for sale. And sometimes the buyers will take that and review it. They can call the home inspector sometimes for a nominal fee and go through it with them, or they may just prefer to have their own home inspector come in and do their own inspection on the property. So there's always the chance that they'll do that. And then if there's any major deficiencies in the home, they have the ability to rescind the offer or potentially negotiate to have those items fixed before closing at the seller's own cost, or to do an abatement in price to reflect what the improvements would be. Whenever I'm representing a buyer, or we are in our team, we always kind of explain to them that these are older houses oftentimes in Toronto. The job of the home inspector is going to be to find some issues with the house. So expect that they're going to come up with something. For some of these older houses, like we might see between $15,000 and $20,000 of deficiencies and repairs that will have to be done over the course of the next few years. If you guys would be interested in seeing a dedicated video on the things that we are highlighting or that our inspectors are highlighting as major issues with some of these older homes as we move forward, then we can definitely make a dedicated video for you on that. But that would be something very common for a house, would be a home inspection condition. We sometimes do them on condos. You know, I just find oftentimes the sellers don't really like to agree to it. And from the buyer's perspective, it is nice for liability to have it done, but you only own what's in your four walls. So they're not going to be checking the roof, they're not going to be checking the exterior, because that's a common element that's related to the condo corporation. So we sometimes will have people do home inspections on some of the condo townhomes where you have your own furnace and some of these things, and the stuff is more accessible. But for the most part, for a condo, we're seeing a condition on the status certificate. So this is basically the financials for the entire building. It will spell out if there's any lawsuits against the condo corporation. So if there's any, shortfall in the building, if there's any special assessments that are going to be rolled out, and it also has all the financials, so you can see how well the building is being managed. And you can kind of see also where it's at within the 3-year reserve fund audit, if maintenance fees are going to go up. It's basically the overall financial health of the building. You can see if there's any major repairs planned, how much money's left in the reserve fund. And this is something that would be conditional on the seller typically paying for and ordering from the property management company and then submitting to the purchaser's lawyer for review, usually for 2 or 3 days after receipt, and just finding it satisfactory. So there's also things in there like if you have 2 dogs, maybe some buildings have a 1 pet policy. So it's good to ask these questions up front before you submit an offer. If you have a pet, or asking if your parking space in the condo can have more than 1 motor vehicle, like could you store a moped or a motorcycle and the car in it? No, you can't. But it's good to look into those things and know upfront. But in case you didn't, that would all be spelled out in the status certificate too. You just would have to ask your lawyer and know to ask those questions when you're reviewing it. And again, if you were unhappy in your sole and absolute discretion, you would have the ability to rescind your offer and get your deposit check back without interest or deductions. And then for assignments, I mean, that could have its own video. And actually, maybe we'll make one at some point just on assignments and how that's structured. Typically, there will be conditions on both sides, on the seller review, on the buyer's lawyer reviewing it. So an assignment, just to clarify, is when you're buying a contract. So that would be like a new condo potentially that's not even ready. You're buying the contract from the original purchaser and just basically stepping in and fulfilling the contractual obligations through to closing. But there would typically be way more conditions in an offer like that, and conditions on both sides. It could work both ways with respect to conditions. And we can also have custom conditions. So maybe if someone's buying a property that has a tenant in it, it could be conditional on the seller obtaining an N11, which is an agreement to terminate the lease so that the tenant will move out and the new buyer doesn't have to assume them, or potentially for a freehold property or a house, on the seller getting consent from the committee of adjustments to do like a laneway house or something like that, right? So we can really draft any type of condition as long as it meets the criteria that we discussed earlier, that it's either for the buyer or the seller, what we want to accomplish, and then how long the offer is going to be open till, and what happens if it doesn't go through, right? Which would be they get out of the deal. So as long as we had all of that organized in there, then you could really create any different type of condition that you're hoping for. And now to talk about the condition that sellers are just not accepting, even though the market shifted. They are not going to agree, typically, just yet, on the sale of a purchaser's home. And we actually received an offer last week where the buyer did ask for my client to agree to a 30-day condition on the sale of their home, and my client just said, you know what, like, we just dropped the price, we don't want to do that. But that's something that if the market does continue to soften, that we may potentially see. When we have really long conditions like that, like let's say 30 days on conditional on the buyer selling their home, usually there would be an escape clause in that for the seller. So basically saying if we receive another offer, that the buyer would have to remove or firm up the condition within 48 hours, something like that, right? So, you know, that's not something that we're not really seeing being accepted right now, but who knows? Maybe if the market continues to soften, we might see it, but right now that's not something that we're seeing sellers being agreeable on. And let's be honest, like, we're still selling properties usually within 30 to 45 days, and pricing has come down a little bit. There is some room to negotiate, but not that much. I hope you guys found this helpful. If you did, go ahead and give it a like. If you have any questions on any of the topics that we've discussed, then go ahead and comment down below. And as always, if you have a home to sell and you're interested in knowing what the value is or what you can do to slowly get ready and prep it for sale, I'd love to hear from you. And if you're interested in buying a home and you would love a custom list of properties, we're happily able to send that over to you. Until next time, bye. And don't forget to like, share, and follow us on social media.